Senator Edward Kennedy that his name not be placed in nomination, that votes not be cast for him, and I will personally honor that request. I'd like to say further that I think this delegation has been openly before the American people an example of the kind of politics that I hope the future holds. We came here, none of us, with much of a grip on anyone else on this delegation. There probably are 5 or 6 people.
Madam Chairman, Florida votes 7 yeas, 56 nays.
The Florida vote is 7 yes, 56 no.
On this vote, on the minority report, the yeas are 141 and 1/4, the 1,041 and 1/4. The nays are 1,567 and 3/4, and the minority report is not agreed to. The question now recurs on the adoption of the resolution. So many as are in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. The chair recognizes the governor of West Virginia.
Move that we do now recess till 6:30.
The question's on the motion. So many in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and accordingly, the convention stands in recess until 6:30 this evening.
Who has been selected to speak for the Vice President? Well, may I say then, does anyone wish to speak for the Vice President at this point? I haven't asked anyone before this point, Gene. I just assumed that all of us knew our candidates well enough that we could make our speech without having to be notified. Mr. Schuman, you recognize.
Yes, as
On the other matter, not on the other matter yet.
not on the other matter. Well, in that case, I think somebody here is more capable of talking for the Vice President.
Now, let me say I would hope that we could keep these presentations to a minimum on the part of everyone, because we had a privilege which no other delegation has been accorded as far as I know, and that is to have heard all of the candidates before us at the same time yesterday. As a consequence, it ought not to take too much time.
Mr. Speaker,
Down here. We have heard from the candidates themselves yesterday morning that it really is kind of supererogatory to have somebody stand up and talk for them now. So it would be my motion, if the chair will entertain a motion, I will move that we dispense with presentations on behalf of the candidates at this time.
Well, I think rather than get into a point of having motions and counter motions and so on and so forth, maybe it would be satisfactory if I said we'd have one person to make a presentation for each of the three candidates, if they so desire, and let it go at that. It seems to be a sort of a compromise. Ian? I'll recognize for the Vice President our National Committeeman, Gene Wyman. May I say, Gene, before you begin here, that even though your vote has been considerably different from the rest of the California delegation, in most cases, that you've been very kind and courteous about it. And here, as you leave this post, I wish to express my thanks to you for the many tasks that you perform for Democrats and Democratic causes over the past years since September 14th of 1961, when I supported you for Southern Vice Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. As Norbert Schleiss said, we had a great opportunity to hear all three candidates and have those candidates be judged by you. However, I was not going to miss the opportunity and let it go by default if speeches were in order. Let me just tell you personally, within 2 minutes, how I reached my own personal decision. When President Johnson withdrew, that night, that Sunday night, I was as surprised as anybody in the world. And then I was faced with a free choice to decide between Vice President Humphrey, who had not as yet announced, Senator Robert Kennedy, who was a dear friend and who I knew well, and I had worked for his brother closely with the Speaker, and Gene McCarthy, who I respected and also was a friend. And yet, I must tell you that personally, it took me no more than a few minutes as I went over the history of all three to decide that the best man to lead our country, in my opinion, was the Vice President. It was based not only upon his great experience, but upon his instincts. And when I judged myself, and as I tried to weigh each man, because no one put pressure on me at all, I felt that in a high position, that so often important men have to make decisions without having hours and hours to think about it. And consequently, we had to have a man that was not only experienced and had had the background, but had all of the right instincts of human compassion, had to know how to move based upon heart. To me, the man that qualified that way because of the years that he had spent in public life, the man who best qualified to lead this country was the Vice President. So based upon that, on the Monday morning following the withdrawal of the President, I called his office and offered my support. Everything that has happened since that time has reinforced my own opinion that the man who can best solve our problems at home and abroad, the most flexible man, the man with the best instincts, is the Vice President of the United States, and I hope that California will give him as much support as possible, if not tonight, certainly in the future, because only by working together can we defeat Nixon. I worked with the Speaker so closely in the Pat Brown, Dick Nixon campaign, and together I think we played a major role in retiring Dick Nixon. We thought permanently. It wasn't that way. I hope that this time, working with everybody, that we can all pull together and retire Dick Nixon permanently. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I'll recognize Frank Mankiewicz to speak for Senator McGovern.
I'll be very brief. I will say that, first of all, that I intend to second the nomination of George McGovern tonight. I am proud to do that. I had hoped that I might have performed other duties at this convention, as I'm sure you feel as well. But I want to say that we heard George McGovern yesterday in what was probably the finest and frankest and freest political debate of the campaign to date, and I suspect for the entire campaign. And I think you all agree with me that he demonstrated in every way, in his grasp of the issues, in his ability to command respect and interest and attention from his audience, in his ability to inspire, and in his sincerity and dedication, of why Robert Kennedy had no hesitation in describing him on any and all occasions as the finest member of the United States Senate. I would hope that this delegation would cast as large a vote as you can for George McGovern. I would have hoped this morning, and I still hope, in light of Jess Unruh's indication this afternoon of his support for Eugene McCarthy, that the vote for George McGovern not exceed that of Eugene McCarthy's, because I would not want the Speaker, considering his performance here at this convention and his performance in leading the Democratic Party in past years, and I trust in future years, and perhaps the state of California in future years, to support a candidate who didn't get at least as many votes from the state of California as the other candidates. And so I proposed this morning that we take the small number of votes in this delegation for the Vice President and then take the remainder, and I had hoped that I could get together with the forces representing Senator McCarthy and split the remaining votes and agree that California would cast a peace vote of 164 or whatever it was, a vote for the principles for which Robert Kennedy campaigned and won in California, evenly divided between Eugene McCarthy and George McGovern. That proved to be an illusory hope. I can understand the feelings of anybody here who want to go ahead and vote and pursue this and see what how many votes the candidates come up with. I can only hope that you will see in George McGovern what I see in him and what his friends in the past see in him, which is the best candidate for the presidency before this convention, whatever the other things that may be happening here might provide. I don't think there's any question of the fact that each one of you knows in your heart, if I may hark back 4 years, that George McGovern is the best of the three candidates for the presidency. Every member of the United States Senate I've talked to in this convention agrees with me. Many of them have endorsed him. Many have not, but not without saying that there is no question that he is the best candidate. Considering the posture of this convention this afternoon, I think California can afford to cast a vote for the best candidate for the presidency and let it go at that. And I would hope that we can do that, and that when our vote is announced this evening, it will demonstrate that this delegation stands as it did when it was formed and as it did through the primary election and since, for those twin principles, as George McGovern has said, of an honorable end and a quick end to the moral catastrophe that is our war in Vietnam, and for the rebuilding and restructuring of our society at home. I think George McGovern would be a strong president. I think he would be a strong candidate, and I think he deserves, perhaps here more than anywhere else, the vote of this delegation. And I thank you.
Well, I have one small problem here to get over. Congressman Burton and I have worked very closely during the course of this campaign and during the course of this convention, and he has served us exceptionally well, I think, on the... I'm sorry. I said I have one small problem here because Congressman Burton has been serving on the Platform Committee, and I might add serving exceedingly well. And he has not had a chance to address this group before insofar as his preference is concerned. I think because he is a member of the Congress with a long and illustrious future ahead of him, I hope that it would be courteous for us to allow him a brief moment to state his views so far as this is concerned. I would like an exception that this not be considered the presentation for the candidate that he endorses. But if there is concern about that, I will try to equalize it out with someone else. Let me call on Congressman Phil Burton and thank him again for his service and practice.
Thank you, Jess. As a few of my intimates knew, sometime after the death of Senator Kennedy, I had really hoped, I think, that a man that I had known so many years and liked so much personally, and I refer to the Vice President, would reflect more closely the position taken by Senator Kennedy in terms of the war. I must confess, about a week ago, I lost much of that hope, and I hope that perhaps during the course of the vote on the minority plank, that in fact those effectuating the management of the Vice President's campaign would really be indifferent and permit or encourage delegates to call them as they see them. I had to wait to see if the proposed speakers spoke on the majority side, and I refer to Senator Muskie and Jerry Joseph, both of whom are very close to the Vice President. His floor manager is a colleague of mine. I'm reasonably satisfied that they indicated that they felt that the majority plank's passage would assure the Vice President's candidacy. In my view, I only have one relevant vote to cast. I think Jess stated it so very well. My hopes with reference to the Vice President were not fulfilled. George McGovern's a wonderful guy. He got in late, and so the only relevant thing for me to do, by way of indicating that I think our policy in Southeast Asia must be changed, not only if we are to win in November, but more importantly, if our society is to strive and prosper. Therefore, I intend to vote for Gene McCarthy.
In case you didn't know, the vote on the floor, I'm told, which they finally announced, was yes, 1,041 1/4, no, 1,567 3/4. The vote on the floor on the Vietnam resolution was yes, 1,041 1/4, no, 1,567 3/4. The floor has adjourned now to the hour of 6:30 p.m. I do not know whether we would, I assume, will not be planning to try to take the buses back, so there is not time enough to do that. All right, I had intended to recognize, for the purposes of speaking for Senator McCarthy, and as I said before, if there is any desire or any feeling that I have shorted either of the other two candidates after this, I will be very happy to allow someone from both of those candidacies an equivalent amount of time to Congressman Burton, which I assume was about 1 minute, for purposes of whatever they might have in mind. This time I would like to recognize the man whom I'm sure all of you would recognize if he didn't have his beard on, because he was a man that was very, very active in Senator Kennedy's campaign. He came into the campaign early, during a time when there was a great deal of duress as far as men from organizations such as his were concerned. It took a great deal of personal courage to do that. It took a great deal of personal courage to survive many of the other things that have happened to this young man, but he has never been known for a lack of that courage. Mr. Paul Schrade, United Automobile Workers.
Thank you very much, Chairman Unruh. I would like to rise and second Jess Unruh's nomination of Eugene McCarthy for a number of reasons, many of which you know, and those I'm not going to repeat. I know as an official of a large union like the United Auto Aerospace Workers Union that I was in some jeopardy in supporting Bob Kennedy and participating in this convention, doing the things along with you, because many people in the labor movement do not agree that there ought to be change in this country. And that's one of the things that's wrong with much, but not all, of the labor movement today. But I'm not seeking popularity. I think that's too late in this country. I think that's what Bob Kennedy was telling us, and that's what Eugene McCarthy and many other American leaders have been telling us. There are so many risks for all of us in the world today that we need courage. We need people who are not concerned about popularity and are worried about the issues and try to do something about them. Eugene McCarthy was the first hope this year for change in our war policy and many of our domestic policies in this country. He was accused of being a one-issue candidate, but anybody in his right mind knows that without an end to the war in Vietnam, all of the issues become irrelevant, neglected, disposed of very easily, and nothing is done about racism or poverty of any consequence, and we continue to be in danger. I think Bob Kennedy knew that too, and that's why he entered the race upon Jess Unruh's urging, upon the urging of me, of other people around this country, in order to take on the administration and take it on the policies and the issues that concerned all of us. I think we're a very divided nation. I think we're a very divided party at the present time. I don't think we're going to be unified very easily. All of us had hopes that Ted Kennedy could be drafted and be in the race at this time. That's the way I woke up this morning, feeling refreshed. I spent the day yesterday back at the hotel because I'm not as strong as I should be. But we're facing something else today. But I don't think it's really the kind of defeat that ought to concern us. I think it's the kind of issues and the kind of people we've been supporting that give us some kind of a victory today. We've seen in Chicago here some very bad behavior upon people that we associate with in the Democratic Party. But all of us know again that military answers, the use of force, is no answer, whether it's in Vietnam or the slums of America, or in Prague, or in Chicago, or in this convention itself. And that's one of the things that we've been fighting against. And that's one of the things that we've been winning on here at this convention. And I'm sure this delegation has made that kind of an impact. Like most of you today, I received a statement from a group of Mexicans who are Democrats who are seeking some hope, some change from this party of ours. And their last sentence in that mimeograph statement, which was handed out on the floor, was one of sympathy for us, those who are not Mexicans or Negroes or Orientals or those people who are discriminated against in this country of ours. They said in their last line, "Welcome, fellow delegates. We join you in your grief. We understand." And I think that's very noble of them, but again, it leads to the question, what comes out of this convention for poor people? What comes out of this convention for people who are subject to racism and all kinds of oppression in this land of ours and other countries as well? So I think the kind of unity that we've got to develop here today amongst ourselves is the most important kind of unity of all. Now, I was contacted and asked to support Senator McGovern. He's a fine man. He's a person I've worked with in the peace movement for the last several years. I think he's one of the finest senators and finest leaders this country has ever presented. But I look at Senator George McGovern not only as a friend, but as kind of a way out of making some of the tough decisions that we've got to make. And that's why I endorsed Eugene McCarthy last week when I came off my sick leave, with the hope that we could take on the issues and in this convention, unify it, even draft Ted Kennedy. And I would like people here to know just what Senator McCarthy's position was on that draft Kennedy movement. I was handed a statement coming in here from the TV monitor, which was processed at 4 p.m. Charles Quinn of NBC, in talking to Senator McCarthy, reports this. Senator McCarthy said last night he offered to withdraw from the race to support Ted Kennedy at a private meeting with Stephen Smith because he thought Kennedy might have a better chance. One reason was the position Humphrey took yesterday on the war in Vietnam in the California delegation, a total defense of the administration. He felt Humphrey should be stopped at all costs. I believe that too, and I'm proud to say the candidate that I chose last week was able to make that kind of commitment to Steve Smith last night. But that's behind us, and I think that we have only one real task here to perform, and that's to try to unify this delegation. I don't think that Jess Unruh is going to twist arms or put the pressure on anybody. He made a statement saying that's the way he was going to vote. He didn't even recommend how you were supposed to vote, and I'm not either. But I think the best position that we can take today is to endorse Senator Eugene McCarthy and vote for him in the convention tonight, because we need unity. We're going back to face some of the toughest races this party has ever had this fall. And I think the hopes of the world for peace, the hope of poor people in this country, those who are subjected to racism and oppression, want some kind of hope for change. And we've got to do that. So I think what we ought to do today is to endorse Eugene McCarthy for ourselves, for those that we are trying to give leadership to, and for the whole world. Thank you very much.
Pierre, do you want to, you've had so much prime time television already, I don't know whether I should give you any more or not.
Thank you very much, Jess, and I will be very brief. First, I want to express my appreciation to the members of this delegation for the way in which they have upheld the tradition, of Robert Kennedy at this convention. On every vote that we have had, whether it be in the interest of stopping racial discrimination in the South, of enlarging the halls of discussion of our Democratic National Committee and allowing young people participation, or whether it was on today's vote on the war in Vietnam, this delegation has upheld the principles of Robert Kennedy. And I also want to thank the chairman of this delegation, Speaker Unruh, for the kind of dedicated leadership that he has given to this delegation and the kind of
really new and basic politics, the kind of politics that Bob Kennedy believed in, that he has allowed us to conduct here in Chicago. As many of you know, I am going to vote for George McGovern. And I only ask you to think of several things when you do cast your vote. As I said when I spoke on the platform today, I have the greatest admiration for the fight of Senator McCarthy in those lonely days in the spring when nobody thought that he should be running for president. But I also believe that Senator McGovern, though very late in the race for the presidency, is a man clearly in the tradition and the idealism of Robert Kennedy. And I know that those of you who heard him yesterday do not need any long pep talk from me about George McGovern. I think he spoke well for himself here before this caucus. I think he made his own points. But I'm going to make a very practical appeal to you right now. George McGovern is going to have to go back to South Dakota and run for United States Senator. It would be a tragedy for America if we were to lose his voice in the United States Senate. He comes from a highly conservative state, and it's a proud state. And they're going to be looking at tonight's roll call to see whether the race for the presidency by George McGovern was just some kind of a futile exercise, or whether he was able to convince some reasonable number of delegates that they should vote for him. Some of his hopes, in fact many of his hopes, reside in this delegation. So I would ask, as many of you who felt that yesterday he clearly demonstrated that he was the best possible candidate for President of the United States, I would ask those people who felt that yesterday to vote for George McGovern today. Thank you.
Terry Francois has asked me to be allowed to speak to the Vice President.
Let me say first that I want to commend this California delegation. I've felt very proud of this delegation for its performance at this convention. The independence shown, the intelligence, the enthusiasm, it certainly made me feel proud to be a part of this delegation, and I think that we've certainly made a great impact on the convention and any other delegation. I'm prepared to speak for the Vice President for a number of reasons. At the outset, let me say that I'm convinced, because I believe this man has great integrity, and when he tells us that if elected President of the United States, that he will be his own man, that he will be, in fact, the President and act as President, I'm willing to accept his word. And I think we should all be willing to accept Hubert Humphrey as a man of integrity. As a black man, I want to express a great deal of concern about the fact that the domestic issues have been obscured and have been obscured by many of our friends. I don't accept the fact that there's only one issue before the American people. And I don't accept the fact that the rights of black people ought to be postponed until we deal with this issue. And I think that is the thinking that at least I gather as I converse with many of my friends and as I discuss with them their positions they have taken with respect to the presidential race. I can't feel that way. And I can't forget the record of Hubert Humphrey, beginning in 1948. As a black person, I would feel less than a man to repudiate this great man who, as a legislator, certainly did more than anyone else I can think of for the cause of the minorities. I would ask that you not forget, that none of us forget, that when we leave this convention, we will still have to face an election in November. And it would be a great tragedy for all of us if Richard Nixon were elected President of the United States. So I'm very proud to say these few words on behalf of the President. I would ask that you consider very seriously, and that in any event, I would hope that we can carry California for whomever the nominee is for this convention. Thank you very much.
Don't we have seats or people standing up here for questions or something? We don't have any seats?
I would like to just make one statement with regard to the Vice President.
Well, now,
That is-
Mr. Otola, if I recognize any more statements in behalf of anyone, then I'm going to have to recognize someone else.
It won't be on behalf, Mr. Speaker. It is simply the announcement that we in San Francisco are proud of the fact that
Now,
our
wait a
mayor.
minute. Mr., I do not recognize that, Supervisor. I'm going to take that up myself. Barb.
Time left right now. We're going to reassemble at 6:30.
We do. We are about to go into the roll call, Mr. Farb. Mr. Brown has one small announcement to make, and then we have one small announcement to make afterward, a couple of announcements to make afterwards. Willie? Just have to lean over, I think, is the problem. And I've been leaning over too much in this.
Chairman Unruh, fellow delegates, fellow Kennedy delegates in this body, first let me say I'm addressing you on behalf of a candidacy of a man whom you probably never heard. Before I begin that statement, though, let me say on behalf of all of the black delegates of the California delegation, on behalf of all of the black alternates in the California delegation, and on behalf of all of the black Californians whom we purport to represent, it is really wonderful for us to find a group of non-blacks capable of following our leadership on race issues. The state of Michigan, the state of Illinois, the state of Pennsylvania, and one or two other states in this union that had the same number of blacks in their delegation, if not a greater number, were unable, literally unable, to convince their respective delegations that they had to vote a conscience vote rather than a political vote on the question of the challenges in the segregated sections of these United States. And for that, those of us who are members of this delegation are deeply grateful for your assistance in that regard. Let me say one additional word. You note that on my left lapel, I have a badge that says Channing Phillips. Channing Phillips is a black minister in Washington, D.C., who is the favorite son from Washington, D.C.'s delegation. It was a Kennedy pledged delegation. He is a Kennedy delegate to this body. His name will be placed in nomination. Some of us, Mrs. Brathwaite will second that nomination. Some of us in this delegation are so displeased with the political control in this party, not the California delegation, but the political control in this party as exhibited with reference to the Georgia challenge particularly and the Alabama challenge, that under normal circumstances we would vote either for Gene McCarthy, which I would normally vote for, or George McGovern, which some of the others would normally vote for, that we are going to cast our vote in protest for the one black man who for the first time will be nominated as a favorite son in this body, for a man who has the correct position on Vietnam, for the man who has correct position on the question of the cities, and for a man who has the correct position on the question of race, Channing Phillips. We don't necessarily ask you to join with us, but we'd like for you, our fellow delegates, to know our position in this regard. Thank you.
While I'm getting the roll call ready here, We have Mr. Mondo Mania here who would like to say one word about the Brown Caucus, not insofar as its support for the presidential candidate, but in comment on our activities.
On behalf of the Brown Caucus, I'd like to thank the California delegation, which I am recently a member of, for its support of the minority positions on all the challenges on the floor. On behalf of them, I'd like to thank you for your deportment on the floor, which is really thrilling for us to see a California delegation, a delegation which we helped elect, which we played a very important part in California and throughout the Southwest. I worked in the Viva Kennedy campaign, and I was in the sound unit. And my job was just to go around announcing when Kennedy was going to be in town and to get out the vote. And I had the most aspirating experience of my life to see a people which everybody considers docile, a people who had never before been politically involved, get out, walk the precincts, and work for this man. And little kids would come up to you with their eyes crying and say, "Mister, is Mr. Kennedy coming?" And the old people in Spanish would tell you, "God help him." We'd like to thank you for your support of the Texas Challenge delegation, which was a protest to get more brown people represented. We also would like for you to consider very deeply what role the Mexican American is going to play in electing anyone in the nomination, anyone who gets the nomination that you choose. Because in California, the Kennedy campaign proved the Democratic